Welcome to another sewing marathon. Today's marathon is for Halloween, and all day long you can watch videos where others are sewing up some of their favorite Halloween projects or maybe trying a new project with Halloween fabric. For my video, I've chosen to use the Stitches by Christy pattern, the Angie basket trio. This is one of my favorite patterns. I use it so much around my home. I use it for storage and organization. But around the holidays, I love to make new baskets so that I can use them for decorating. I'll put things in them, of course, like candy, and it'll just be a really cute decoration sitting on my counter. This pattern comes in small, medium, and large. I batch sew a lot of these for my craft shows, and then I just have them on my craft table all nested inside each other so that it looks like a complete set. This is a great seller at my craft shows. And there's even a way to make these even quicker if you want to save a little bit of time with batch sewing if you're doing a lot of vendor shows. If you're going to a baby shower, this is perfect to make a set of these and then to put a few essential items in here to give to the new parents, a bridal shower, birthday parties. This pattern is one of my favorites because it is so versatile. And the way you can sew it up and the way you can give it as gifts is the way you can sell it. So thank you to Stitches by Christy for letting me make this tutorial. And I hope today, while watching all these videos, you might find a new pattern that you like, or maybe a new idea of something you want to sew up in your sewing room. For the version of the Angie basket that I'm sewing up in today's video, I'm making the large version. I am using fabric from the Emporium. This print is not currently on her pre-order. She does have a pre-order open right now, but this one could be requested if you want. She has an option that any of the past prints from her other rounds, you can request them on a current pre-order. The current pre-order is the Leopard's round, and it closes on Halloween. For my materials, it's all a cotton woven, but Brittany's cotton woven is a little bit sturdier. It's more like a cotton canvas, so I don't have any interfacing on any piece at all. After I have the exterior completed, then I will interface. I like to use foam in this pattern because I feel like it gives it a little bit of a sturdier feel, and where this is a basket that I'm using for storage, I just think that's important. I have used fleece in this pattern, but I feel like fleece does give it a softer feel and it kind of is a little more floppy. This pattern is a measure and cut pattern. There's no pattern pieces. For each basket, the small, medium, large, you have a separate set of measurements. For each of the baskets, the lining will be your biggest piece. So for your lining, you will cut out 2 of this piece here. Then for your exterior, you will have 2 of this top piece, 2 of your contrast piece, and then 2 of the bottom piece. We will also have this base piece, 1 for the exterior and 1 for the lining. Typically when I make the handles, I just make it out of the fabric from the exterior, but since I am making this a Halloween version, I thought I would use some of my webbing from the Emporium. This one is from an older round, but I love it so much, and I thought it would just be fun to add to the pumpkins. I'm using this tag from Sewing Blurbs, and I'm using this tag from Heartwood and Hide. Here is how my exterior will look. I'll have the top, the accent, and the bottom. I want to add a cork tag on one side and a woven tag on the other. I know that my cork tag will go centered on this accent piece, but my woven tag, I really don't want it centered, and I want it a little bit more to the side, but I don't want it completely on the side. To figure out the placement for that woven tag, I'm going to pull out that base piece, I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to center it or get a rough idea of how it's going to look when it is centered. That lets me know that this section here is going to be the side, and I don't want my woven label on the side. I want it here on the front, but not exactly in the middle. That gives me a kind of rough idea of how I want it to look. I'm going to just place it here on this bottom piece. I'll add a clip so it stays. If you want, you can base it first. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this accent piece and lay it right sides together with this bottom piece, and then we'll stitch all across here. Once you have the accent piece clipped right sides together with that exterior bottom piece, you're going to sew from one edge to the other with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Once you have those two pieces attached, what you're going to do is you're just going to flip up this accent piece. We're going to keep this seam allowance going up, and we're actually going to top stitch on the accent piece. You can take this over to the iron if you want, but I'm just going to finger press it up, and then I'm going to top stitch with the seam allowance given, which is always my top stitching at 1/8 of an inch away from this folded edge. Once you have the top stitching done, then you're going to take the top piece and you're going to repeat the same steps you did with the accent piece. We're going to take this top piece, place it right sides together with the accent piece. If your print is directional, make for sure it's going in the right direction, so have it orientated the way you want it to look before you flip it down. I'm going to clip all along these edges, and then we're going to sew with that same seam allowance that we just used, the one that is given in the pattern. Now that I have that top piece sewn on, I'm going to this time flip that seam down because I want to be able to top stitch on this accent piece. I want both of my rows of top stitching on that accent piece, and that will give the illusion that it's kind of a 3D piece that is kind of attached on. Instead of all of them being flush, it'll look like this one is a little bit out. It's just a kind of play on the eyes. So I'm going to flip that over and just press that seam allowance down. You can iron it if you want. And now I'm going to come back over and top stitch on the accent piece once again. I'll use that same seam allowance at 1/8 of an inch. Here's how the first side of the exterior looks. I will repeat those same steps for the other exterior, adding the top, accent, and bottom all together. On the second side though, I won't add a woven label. I'll simply sew a cork label in the middle. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the bottom center of this piece and on my base piece. Once I have the two center marks made on the exterior front and the base, I'm just going to flip this base up so that it is right sides together with that exterior. I'm going to clip this in place, making sure that edge matches up the two raw edges. Where once again you're going to use the seam allowance given the pattern, back stitch, and sew all the way across just the base piece. Once I have the base attached, I'm just going to fold it down. I'm going to leave the seam allowance where it is and just simply fold this base down, finger press it flat, and then I'm going to top stitch it in place, so I'm only top stitching on this base piece across here. This is how one exterior and the base looks. I'm going to complete the other exterior off camera, and I'm going to attach it to this base piece exactly as I just did. The lining's a little bit simpler. So for the lining, I will just attach the base to it and sew it so that they both look the same. I always check my lining against my base to make for sure they're the same size. Since we're having a couple of construction stitches here, they could easily have shifted, or your seam allowance might not have been perfect, or maybe your cutting was a little off. So definitely check, because you want your lining to be the same size as your exterior. I'm going to go off camera and get my exterior and my lining sewn up, and I'm actually going to go ahead and attach my inner facing, which I'm using foam, to this exterior. I'll come back and show you what it looks like and talk about those steps whenever I get those done. I have my exterior completed. I have both the exterior front and exterior back attached to the base. I did the same thing with the lining piece. Here is the lining. I made sure that I checked it against the exterior to make sure the size was correct. I sewed the base on both sides and top stitched it. I didn't add any interfacing to the lining. I'm just leaving the cotton woven as it is, as I feel like it's enough structure. But on this exterior piece, I did attach this entire piece to foam. I used a fusible foam and fused everything together. You could fuse everything individually, but I really just like to do one solid piece, and I did keep it in my seam allowance. Now at this step, I really think it's a great idea if you want to cut this piece out of a template to use in the future. You can use poster board, or if you don't have a piece big enough, you could cut it on the fold. If you have a non-directional print and need a last minute gift, This is the perfect pattern. You wouldn't have the contrast pieces, so it wouldn't be as visually unique, but it would make a really cute basket and super quick. So you could try a non-directional print and sew one up a lot quicker than you would with these extra pieces here. The next step is to fold these pieces together, right sides together, so that we can sew the sides first. So I'm going to take one of the exterior pieces, bring it over to the other exterior piece. It should match up perfectly, but you can check to make sure your accent pieces match up. And I'm just going to clip along the sides here, and then I'm just going to sew down this side. Let's do the same thing to the other side, and then we'll box the corners. Once you have your sides sewn up, then you're going to box the corners. You can make a snip here if you want, but I'm just going to use a clip to mark the center of this bottom piece. We know the center of this piece will be that side seam, so all we have to do is open this up and match those two marks. I'm going to butterfly the seam with the foam and match up the seam with that center mark. Then I'm going to pull, smooth out the edge, and then match these 2 points together as well. Come over to the other side, do the same thing. I like to smush everything flat so I can see that perfect straight line there to sew across. This is how that seam looks. Let's go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Once I have both of the corners boxed, I'm going to flip out my exterior. Make for sure that all your seams look good. Even if it's not laying like a perfect square, don't worry about that. That's not expected to. We'll shape it after we're done. So once I have everything done here, I'm going to do the same steps with the lining. Now I am sewing this as a drop-in. If you want to follow the pattern directions to birth this bag, you would leave an opening in the lining just like the pattern directs you to. I just prefer a drop-in. It's just what I like to do best. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fold down the seam allowance on this exterior piece. I have the seam allowance clipped down. If you're someone who struggles with clipping down for a proper seam allowance, you can draw the seam allowance on and fold the raw edge down to the mark that you drew. This is how my exterior looks. I am going to go ahead and grab out my lining and do the same thing. Sew the sides, box the corners, and then fold down the seam allowance. When I come back, I will have the lining dropped in here and we will start with the next steps. So I have the exterior and the lining clipped together. I have both of the edges folded down the seam allowance given the pattern so everything is the same size and we have a finished edge. For the handles, so I'm using webbing which makes my handles stand up. If you want your handles to lay down, you would want to use a woven material and not interface it, and it'll kind of be more droopy. This way is really cute because it's easy to pick up and carry. As far as the placement goes, the pattern doesn't give you a specific measurement for the placement because it's kind of a personal preference. So what I do is here at this center mark, I go 1.5 inches out on each side, so that means there's 3 inches in between my handle. I feel like that's a good proper spacing, but you can choose whatever you want. So now at this step, the only thing I have left to do is top stitch all around this basket. That'll attach the lining to the exterior and the handles. I am just going to put the exterior against the bed of my machine. Now at this point, the basket's completely done and can be usable, but I really want those nice sharp creases in the corner so it looks really good like a box instead of kind of bowing out. So what I do is I find this corner point and then I just crease it, making sure that the edges are flush. It's not going to be perfect, but we want to make sure that top is straight. And I'm just going to add these big rubberized clips. It has a layer of silicone there at the bottom, so it's easy on the fabric without leaving like a really sharp indentation. These clips help hold it into place, and they will leave dents in the material, but it does go away. So if you don't leave it on for too long, you won't have too much of a problem. Let's do this all around all of the corners on this basket. Looking at this, you can see how much better the shape looks. It has that perfect shape. So you could leave these clips in overnight. I don't. When you take them off, you'll see a little bit of the indentation. What you're doing is you're kind of training the foam which way to lay. And if you do have the indentions, you can use your iron to iron them out. But I just leave it on for a little bit of time to kind of teach the foam the way I want it to lay. If you want a more permanent crease over time, if you're putting a lot of heavy things in this, or if you're carrying it around a lot, it will kind of get softer on the edges. You could add a rivet here at the top. You could even tack down this edge a little bit to kind of help hold it in place. I don't find that necessary. I don't do it, but you definitely could. So I just left those in for just a minute maybe. Take them out and you can see it's holding its shape. Looking from this side, you can see that crease there. It looks adorable. My perfect little Boo Halloween basket is done. My daughter picked out the materials for this one, so this one is going to her. She just moved into her first apartment by herself, and she will be handing out candy, so I thought it would be fun to take over this basket filled with lots of candy, and we can sit together and hand out the candy on Halloween for trick-or-treat in her first apartment on her own. So thank you for watching another tutorial of mine. This is the Stitches by Christy pattern, the Angie basket trio. I'm using materials, this fabric and the webbing from the Emporium. The cork tag is from Heartwood and Hide. The woven label is from Sewing Blurbs. I will have a link to the materials in my description. If you have any questions about this pattern or the materials I use, let me know. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a happy Halloween if you celebrate, and I hope you are able to watch the other Sew-Is Today while we all participate in the sewing marathon. Thanks so much for watching.